on here. So, custom elements. Custom elements let you register something in the DOM that you can use. So you're extending the HTML element prototype. You can give it different functions, different attributes, and then you call document.registerElement, and then you can reuse that element throughout your page. So imagine if you wanted to do like something that pulls up your camera, or an image carousel, something like that. So that's what it would let you do. You define it, and then you can reuse that throughout your page. I'm touching on that very briefly. Templates, it's the template tag, and it creates an innert part of the DOM. So it is parsed, but it doesn't do anything. It's just held in memory. So templates, in the past, think of it like, currently at Huddle we use handlebars, and we have a require.js plugin that pulls it in templates that are handlebars formatted. So those are HTML files. Prior to that, a lot of people had to go through a lot of tricks and hoops to do that kind of thing, where you're doing HTML in your JavaScript, or you might pull it out of a script tag, or you might pull it out of a text area. But at least now they finally created a standard. Now you have a place you can put your HTML when you're not using it. Then HTML imports. I actually ran into this a while back. I was creating a presentation. I was trying to do it all in HTML without using any JavaScript or any kind of back-end technology, and I couldn't do it without copying and pasting lots of HTML from page to page. So they finally made a way that you can import an HTML file from an external location. So it's link tag rel equals import, and then it doesn't actually do anything right away when you include that tag. You have to use this document query selector and then grab that DOM element and get .import, and that will give you the contents of that file. So we've had script for JavaScript, we have links for style sheets, images, we have all these other ways of pulling in other media. Finally, we have a way of pulling in an HTML file that doesn't require JavaScript other than accessing that DOM node. And then there's shadow DOM. So we have light DOM, which is what we're all used to working in, and then shadow DOM is a document tree that is actually it's encapsulated from your main document. So your CSS doesn't impact shadow DOM, your JavaScript won't impact shadow DOM. It's protected from the rest of your document. So I'll show you some examples of this. You can create a shadow DOM tree with this call. You have a DOM element, you call create shadow root on that, and that will create the DOM tree. So you're actually pretty familiar with these. You've seen them before. If you see, browsers implement things like the video tag. Recently, there was this date input type, and you get all this UI here. Now, you assume that the browser is doing all the work for that. They built that in, they created that interface. But you can actually see, if you inspect the code, that there is a shadow DOM tree in your input tag, and then all of that UI that you're looking at is actually in there. If you do that with the video tag, you'll see the same thing. So traditionally, as you're building a website, you end up with our files are coupled in the way that we separate our JavaScript, we separate our CSS, we separate our HTML. So we call that separation of concerns. It's actually like separation of technologies and languages. So you end up with these larger files that can be hard to use and reuse. Now we've solved some of that for JavaScript with things like require and AMD. CSS, if you use Sass or less, you can segment out your CSS. So it's getting better. HTML, if you're using some back-end technology, yeah, you can use templates on the back end and reuse your HTML, but not really in the browser. So overall, if you're looking at a single page, you end up with one large JavaScript segment of the page, one single style sheet, and then your document. So when you're working with web components, you're going to think more about functionality, UI, and behaviors. So now I'm going to segment out my page into different pieces of JavaScript, CSS, and HTML that are more tightly coupled, depending on what their function is for a certain UI or certain behavior. Now, Web Components still is pretty new, and there's a Web Components polyfill, so we're going to have to build our website and put that on top of this polyfill layer. So I'm going to show you a quick example of just doing a vanilla web component in this case. So think of like that input tag we saw with the date, with the calendar pop-up. That's a very good example of what you could make with a web component. So just basically creating a new element. So I have document register element. You can extend existing elements pretty easily. You can create a new type of input field or a new type of button, something that's already native to the browser. And from there, you have the ability to create whatever behavior you want that element to have. So when it's added to the page, you can make it do something. You can add certain functions that you can call and make it do something. So just like on an input field, you call .value, you get the value of whatever's in that input field. I could have some kind of counter in the background, and I could pull out values from it, or I can modify values. So as you're creating your element, you can create your own API for that element. So this one, it just loads on the page and generates an alert. Nothing exciting. So that was creating an element. Now I'm going to add in templates. So now I have a template tag in my same file, just an image and a header. And now when I create my element, I'm going to grab that template, that DOM element there, just grab the contents of it, and then append that into my element. So I've created some reusable HTML now. And that's what you get with that. Nothing much yet. So going one more layer, HTML imports. I'll pull that template out, put that into another HTML file, and now I put my link at the top of my page. And like I showed before, now I can just access that link element and grab the contents of that, and now I can append that into my node. So now it's starting to look a little more componentized. Another thing is styles. You can put that in your template, so then when you get to Shadow DOM, you can generate styles that only apply to your component that you're creating. So your styles won't impact any other parts of the page, and vice versa. So this is what would happen. I put some styles, I'll go back here, I put some styles in this template, I put that in my tag, and now that H1 style I created is affecting other parts of the page, which is definitely not ideal. So we want to encapsulate our code as much as possible. And the best way to do that then is now with that shadow, create shadow width. So I'm going to create a shadow DOM tree for my element, and then take that template, take the contents of it, append that to the shadow DOM tree. So then now when I add this to the page, my styles are only going to affect my component here, my tag that I created, and not affect any other parts of the page. So now I have a very reusable piece of HTML and CSS that only deals with this tag I'm creating. And see, if you look at it in Chrome Inspector, you'll see there's that shadow right there again. So now we can get to Polymer. Polymer is a layer in between here. It utilizes these polyfills. If the browser supports all of these web component technologies natively, it will use those. But Polymer gives us a lot of syntactic sugar, so we don't have to do quite as much boilerplate as what you saw. So I'll give a quick example of what Polymer elements might look like. I'm going to include, so we're going to need that polyfill, and then, so sorry, this is just if I'm going to use someone else's. It's pretty awesome. I have the polyfill, I import their component, and I use the tag. So normally, say this one right here, this is an actual component you can go download online. It just creates a Google map, puts that on your page. You can put a pinpoint on the map. They have a whole API, you can do a lot of things with it. So I just added a Google map on my page and 3 lines of HTML. I didn't even have to write any code. So if I'm going to create my own Polymer element, I'm going to import the Polymer the main Polymer library at the top here, and it's just a different syntax. It's a little bit easier. I don't want to go into all of the exact details of how to use Polymer, but it's some of the same concepts. You're going to create a template, and then you're going to have some script there that that you use that will register that tag through Polymer, and then you can define whatever behaviors you want that tag to have. So Polymer is generated by Google. It's being worked on by them, and they have a few core libraries out there, a lot of tags that you can use online. The whole idea behind this is reusability and modularity. So making the web a lot more easier to share components around and not have to always write your own code. So some of the ones they have, another thing with custom tags is they always have to start with a prefix. So that's why everything you see here is something dash. So Google uses core dash for a lot of theirs. So there's a lot of different UI components you can go grab. And there's some other ones, Ajax, local storage, style. So you find out that the Polymer people believe that everything should be an element. And actually, the more you work with it, it's much easier if everything is an element. So if you're normally used to working with something like Backbone or even React, if you need some new piece of JavaScript that exists in a library, you go grab that library and use that script. It doesn't always work so nicely with Polymer, with everything being so separated out. So they created these non-visual elements that can handle certain behaviors. You can have an element that acts as a model, like a Backbone model would, or like how React components can manage their own internal states. You can create your own components with Polymer that manage an internal state. So then you just use that as a model. So you can take different functionalities, create and put that into a component. So local storage will, you can have that bound to another element that anytime, say, your model element changes, it will propagate that to this local storage tag and save that to local storage. You can do that with some things like that with Ajax. I have an Ajax tag. You can have that create a call right away and then send those results to another tag that will utilize those results. So it's a very different way of thinking. You're not doing lots of JavaScript calls back and forth. Everything is in the DOM. So then, earlier this year at Google I/O, Google introduced their paper elements. So if you've seen their material design talk or some of the stuff that they're rolling out on Android, their paper elements are components that are really their way of introducing material design onto the web. So they've made all that online pretty available where you can, you can pretty easily import that into your project and start using some of their stuff. Web components right now are fully supported in the latest Chrome. Firefox, there's still some flags you have to turn on to enable it natively, and IE 10 and 11 have not yet added any native support yet. The polyfill does enough that you can go back to IE 10. So you can use these now, but you will need the polyfill. And components, so you see that when you're adding these imports, you're going to have lots of HTML files. There are build scripts out there that you can use that'll package all that for you. But I want to show you a couple of cool examples of this real quick. So here's that Google map tag I showed you. Go to demo, and so pull this page up. You get this nice Google map. If I actually inspect this, all you'll see here, I'm sorry, it's a little small, but all you'll see here is that there's a Google map tag that's doing all this. You go up in the header, yeah, you'll see they're using HTML imports here. Here's some of the paper elements that I was telling you about. Google has put their own styles into these and their own behaviors behind these things. So if you were to start using paper elements, you have one line of import, and then you just start using that tag on your page, which is pretty cool. They have different tabs here. They have dialogues. So this dialog here is actually just a tag, so, or a DOM element. So you can put your document inside it. I don't know the actual API, but you could like grab that DOM node and maybe just call like .open on it, and there you have a dialog. So all of that JavaScript that you would have to do normally, if you're using like jQuery UI or whatever you use right now, it's all obscured behind that tag, and you don't have to always embed that in every single page that you write dialogues with. I was just looking at to-do MVC. If you've seen them before, for practically every JavaScript framework or library out there, there's a to-do list. So this is their Polymer version. Can't quite, oh, there we go. So I was looking at theirs, and they actually are using elements solely as a model. And there's another part of Web Components called mutation observers. So if a property on my model changes, you can fire off events. So Polymer has some nice syntax here where you can just create functions. So if my items property changes, it will call that function. So if you've worked with React, sounds like a lot of you guys have worked with React before. It's a little bit similar way of thinking where you have lots of nested elements. You have the data flow from the parents to the children. Polymer works more two-way than that, but it's sort of a similar style of architecture if you're used to working with elements and elements and elements and working your way down. Not having one giant document of HTML, but you have segmented parts of HTML. So, oh yeah, another useful site here. As I've been working with Polymer some more, there are a lot of gotchas. It is a developer preview. Right now it's 0.5.1. It's certainly nothing you would want to use in production because your stuff will break at some point. And there's still a lot of gotchas and kinks to work out of it. One thing I found is that, yeah, using JavaScript libraries as I normally would doesn't work so well. So fortunately, there are a lot of custom elements that people put online and they've already published for you. I was looking at one today for doing syntax highlighting for code examples. And fortunately, there's a tag already out there. You just wrap your code in that component, and it does syntax highlighting for you. That's all you need. So there's pretty cool libraries out here. It's definitely fun to go play with it. I think as these things become more integrated into the browsers natively, we're going to see a lot more of this sort of thing, this component idea of architecturing your sites, less than maybe the pure JavaScript ways. So I'd be interested to see if like React or some of these other ones in the future might start taking more advantage of the native browser APIs. So definitely something to keep an eye on. All right, that concludes it.
Somebody got questions for him? Okay, cool. So that's all our presentations for tonight. I'm pretty stoked about how it turned out. I have a few questions before we wrap up. I guess one, I'm curious how many people would want to do this on a monthly basis or like on a bi-monthly basis? Like, is it something that you guys are interested in? Like, yes. Hearing that? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Let's do a hands for monthly. Done. Monthly it is. Okay. So with that in mind, anyone who wants to present in the future, just let me know. We'll probably do more lightning talks in the future. We'll do more like just long presentations. Maybe one lightning talk. Just message me. We'll figure it out. Otherwise, I want to thank Huddle, and Matt's got something to say for that.
Yep. My name is Matt Munger. I'm a developer here at Huddle. And on behalf of Huddle, I guess, thanks for coming out to NebraskaJS. We're happy to have NebraskaJS Lincoln here. Conveniently, we host our happy hour on the third Thursday of every month, which we just voted is going to be our meeting time. So it just started an hour ago at the downtown bar on O Street. There's an open tab there, so if any of you are still up for Q&As or hanging out, feel free to meander on over there and say that you're with NebraskaJS, and you can get some free drinks on Huddle. Downtown. It's on O Street. The bar is called Downtown. I'm confusing, but it's on the main stretch there. You should see it if you head down. So.
Other side 14th, right?
14th and Hill. Yeah, sounds about right.
Cool. All right, I guess I put brewskis in the message, but that's something better option.
It's like the walk versus a free drink.
Yeah.
So it's up to you.
Yeah.
I think there's games and stuff there too. So.
Definitely. Cool. Is anyone in favor of, or is anyone think they'll go to brewskis rather than walking all the way down to downtown? So we can meet there. I think we'll just all go to downtown. Whoever's interested, that is. Yeah. All right, whatever. We'll figure it out.
Feel free to have another slice of pizza too before you leave. Otherwise, we'll eat it tomorrow.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I will be doing it.
I'm glad, because I remember it.
I'm actually looking at that like.
I know, that's what Becky told her. Becky was like,
I'm going to I really like it.
Just think like, all you have to do is think about it.
Exactly, yeah. So,
And then business, like, just get things.
yeah. Plus, like, something like that, like all the future.
I don't need it. You did it first too.
What?
I'm working on something right now.
Oh, I thought you were still doing that.
So I'm like, I can do whatever. I can do so I can get round trip time for 4 months. Okay.
Because if it was cloud, it would be a lot easier.
Rather than straight days. Just think about what daily job.
Same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm really excited.
Sometimes not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we do all our stuff in Rails, but if you understood something up like that, like
I didn't realize you knew the right direction to go. I thought it was the other side.
yeah, probably like you can make a question.
Yeah, thanks for.
I think they're still. They're all here now.
I actually like
We're using terms of blockchain in a way back there.
There's enough that'll allow me to we'll see now. We'll see how that works.
So, it's hard to switched over to go back into their.
I'm bad.
Data model well. I'm not trying to fill that.
I think there's not.
Attempting to. I think he decided he wanted to move on from where it was at. So how close is he going about this guy?
There's two
next time. It wasn't that bad. If it doesn't get fixed, I think it's manageable.
So you essentially take it out.